Oh, again, they're such idiots. I don't like
Hey, we're live now.
it.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us. My name is Robert Greer. I am your host. This is the Anarchist Experience, and we have so far just anarcho-capitalists in the house. We are hoping to get some people from the anarcho-communist side to come on and join us to have a discussion. I had several people say that they were interested in joining us and discussing, but apparently they've decided to opt out at this time. So I wanted to go ahead and I don't know, just answer a couple of questions. Just I don't know, the critiques that you'll see from the anarcho-communists about anarcho-capitalists, and one that you'll see oftentimes is, well, if you have an elite group of I'm a minority, some sort of small percentage of the population who owns all of the means of production, you know, they own all the productive land because there's only a certain amount of productive land, then how is anybody else going to be able to come up and become wealthy or successful? So how does that work? Who wants to take that one?
Well, there's a lot of land already. I mean, you could fit all the people in the United States, all the people in the world can fit in Texas. So there's plenty of lands. If people are worried about running out of lands, we have to have a lot more people in the world first. So we have plenty of time until that. About 80% of the land or so is owned by governments, which means it's unowned. So there's plenty of land, at least for quite a while.
Exactly. So if the one thing they fear is people getting too much land, certainly they don't want a government to monopolize 80% of the land as they always end up doing. With capitalists, at least you can trade. There's a fighting chance that land can be that other people can acquire land either through appropriation or further homesteading. And anyone who's afraid of one group getting too much land or too much power certainly should not be the collective group.
The collective group. Okay. Well
Yeah,
then, oh, go ahead, Kenji.
yeah. There's also, with property, there's also a cost to maintaining and defending it. So unless the property can generate more good than it costs to maintain or protect, uh, it'll this property will usually diversify into the people who can utilize it the best. It's a pure profit motive.
Okay. Right now, the point that I make is, well, theoretically, if we have so many people, at some point, private property is not the only constraint that exists. Personal property exists as far as the communist perspective. And how are they going to prevent a problem where if 100% of the land is owned as personal property and you have one more person added to the equation, they've got a person who's stuck out in the cold. And the elite owns all of the property, so this person gets screwed, right? Well, they still have the same problem. If there's theoretically some sort of like magical number of people that own all of the property out there. Another question comes up is how do you possibly homestead a 20-acre plot of land with condominiums on it? How can you possibly homestead that? How did you build that?
Well,
So, go ahead.
well, first you would put up a fence and then put up a sign letting people know what your plans are. That tell them that you plan to mix your labor with this land by a certain date, and people are going to start raising some eyebrows eventually if they never see you do anything. But people will definitely much prefer that land to be utilized by an entrepreneur because that attracts other people to the town and actually grows the economy, where you have people actually building, producing, and creating wealth. So that's my best guess on how you would homestead a large property.
Well, the question actually is more along the lines of, a single person can't possibly build 20 acres worth of condominiums. How does that, how could one person possibly do that? It's just not possible, right?
Well, that's just it, and that's why one person can't do it, nor could one person centrally plan it. So you have to have markets coordinate these things. That's what you have pricing mechanisms for. I mean, the fact that we do have condominiums that exist in this country, at least, we know that it can happen. How does it happen? We have no clue. But the fact is that it happens. Entrepreneurs make it happen through signaling prices.
All right. Anybody else want to take that one? Nobody? All right. Well, let me give you my explanation as to how it happens. There's this thing called money, and it's a store of value. It is a temporary storage unit that indicates how much labor you already did, and you've saved it for a later point. Now, maybe your parents worked and saved their labor and didn't spend it on consumption. They actually were going to give you the benefits of their labor, the money, and you have a bunch of this money. And so then you pay some guy to do some part, and you pay another guy to do some other part, and you pay another guy to do some other part, and lo and behold, if you got a lot of money to start with, you've already got a bunch of labor that's been previously done that you can put into this project, and then pay other people to do it for you. So that's how you pay a whole bunch of people to make this condominium for you. Now, obviously, it would take a lot of this to be done to make, a condominium set for 20 acres, but certainly it's not impossible. Another thing that people don't realize, actually, let's point this out to people for the anarcho-communists, right? A lot of people who are anarcho-communists will say that the capitalist is exploiting the labor of his employee. That, oh, I don't know, let's just put together an example. We've got a business owner, he's got a grocery store. He is a pencil pusher for part of the time. That's all he does as far as his day-to-day work, so far as people know. But then there's the guy that actually stocks the shelves and puts, goes to the cash register, runs the forklift, does all of this stuff, and he's getting paid, let's say, $8 an hour. And the capitalist pig is making, easily double that. Okay? How is this possibly fair when he's not doing any work? Well, let's just take a look at how it works. First of all, he had all of the money that went into buying the property, buying the building, buying the components that are all a part of what it is to have this business. He went through all this effort in order to save all that money. Hey, welcome. We have Sam joining us. Are you anarcho-communist Sam or anarcho-capitalist Sam?
Anarcho-communist.
Great, great. All right, well then, we were kind of going to go through an idea as far as, of the exploitation thing and explaining it, explaining how it isn't exploitation, but you know what?
Okay.
This show is for you guys to be able to pick our brains and have us be on the back, put us on the defensive. So why don't you give us your biggest critique of the anarcho-capitalist position?
What in particular, I'm not too sure of. I'm quite unplanned, so it's pretty much a last-second thing. So just give me a bit of.
What don't you like about capitalism?
Capitalism.
Typically of the anarcho variety.
Anarcho-capitalism, I've got not much to really say. Like, it's rather so. I guess.
Well, we got Johan here. Let's introduce him. Johan?
This is what drives me crazy. I don't mean to sound like a dick, but and this happened last show. I'm going to sound like a dick.
Yes, you are. Let's introduce Johan.
Unplanned. There's many kind of criterias on capitalism, and more so it's confusing because if I talk about capitalism, so it's like anyway.
All right, well, we've got a lot of people joining in now here. Looks like Johan's microphone isn't working, but then Aaron also joined us. Aaron, are you able to unmute your microphone?
Yeah, just don't want to create an echo.
I guess.
Okay. Well, It seems like the system actually prevents the echo, from happening. If you want to go ahead and jump on in, let me know, and just type it in the group chat, and we'll go ahead and go to your question. So far, we don't really have any questions from the anarcho-communists to justify the existence of anarcho-capitalism or to try to explain to the anarcho-communists. So I'll go ahead and I'll put out the question that I hear a lot of times is that how is it fair that the capitalist can do pencil pushing or go to galas and get-togethers and hangouts and so on, and make all this money. Meanwhile, the actual worker, the laborer, is the one that really does the work, and he's just living off the back of this worker who's putting in the productivity. And the question that the response that I give is that the capital that actually was put into this situation came from somewhere, and it came from labor, and it's accumulated labor that he's actually reinvesting, and that's him actually working. That is his work. Now, I'll give you an example. You've got a grocery store owner. Okay, this guy owns a grocery store. He has, I don't know, you got the store, you got the land that the store is on, you got the electricity bill, you got the gas bill, and you got to actually buy the stuff to sell. Okay, now you've got a guy who basically is not doing anything except for providing the storefront and all that stuff. Okay, where'd the money for the storefront come from? Where'd the money for the goods that are being sold come from? It came from the capitalist. He's the one that brought it up. Where did that money originate? How did he get the money? Well, he either got the money by laboring, or by getting a loan, or by being given it through an inheritance as a gift. Maybe not necessarily an inheritance, but a gift. So if he got it through his own labor, it's pretty clear to see that if he got, if he worked his ass off and saved up all this money instead of actually consuming the proceeds of his labor, he's actually reinvesting that labor, and that's his work. He's actually putting forth his work as the representation, represented by the building. So when he makes, let's say, $10 out of the $18 that are produced in whatever period of time it takes, he's making slightly more than half of what the two are bringing to the table. But I can guarantee you that the labor that it took to build an entire building, to harvest all the corn, to put it into a can, all of this labor that he's bringing to the table that's already been done by him dwarfs the person who is the laborer at the cash register, dwarfs the person who is working as the forklift runner. Is completely, it's so much more work that he's already put in that you guys are completely ignoring. In all actuality, he should be getting, I don't know, somewhere on the order of about 98% to 2% of the first, sale, if you account for all of that. But then over time, eventually, the other laborer is actually put in near parity, or maybe not actually. He may never actually put in anywhere near the amount of labor that the capitalist has already put into the agreement. Does that make sense?
I'm sorry, I'm listening in one side around it, and then it's all coming out of the other for some odd reason. And yeah, I've got headphones on, and I'm not really concentrating, so I apologise on that. I don't really have an answer at the minute.
All right, so the capitalist had to do all the labor that's necessary to get the stuff that he starts with, to build the building. So the building is actually a representation of his physical labor of going out and building that building, of actually going out and getting the corn and putting it into a can so that it can be sold at the grocery store that he owns. Okay?
Okay.
All of that stuff is a representation of what his labor has been in contribution. Just because he bought it with money doesn't mean that he didn't actually do the labor. Okay? Now, if he did do the labor, then you have no complaint there that there's a disparity of income, right? He's the one that put in all the work necessary to make all this happen. And then the laborer who's actually just selling the stuff is putting in nothing comparatively. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
All right, now, a lot of people say, well, that's not where the capitalist gets his money. The capitalist gets his money because he gets a loan, because he's got a good name, or he's given the money from an inheritance. Now, if you're given the money
most of the time, I'd say.
Yeah. So if you're given the money through an inheritance, where'd
Right.
that money come from? That means the person who had the money to give it to him worked at some point. Now, either they worked, or their parents worked, or their grandparents worked, or somebody in their gift-giving line worked. All that labor is still in existence as money. And all of that labor was actually worked by someone. And that someone said, I'm working for you in order to help my love person have that work.
So,
that person's, go ahead.
Yeah, so Robert's trying to say that if you kind of remove money out of the analysis, he's actually produced everything. He's actually produced all the capital, right?
Through his own labor.
Through his own labor, it's equivalent to that.
Yeah. It's a proxy for his labor. It's a it's just a step away, but his labor is actually there, so to speak.
And you might want to distinguish between the capitalist, the guy who actually saves the capital, and the entrepreneur who actually organizes the capital, the labor resource, puts it together into the business, to the actual entity.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. The capitalist being the person who owns the stuff, that puts the money up in order to make it happen.
Yeah, and also laborers. You can look at Western nations. All laborers, if you own stock, you're essentially a capitalist also. I mean, you can use your wage to buy into to businesses and other. You can buy capital yourself with your savings. So just because your labor doesn't.
I need to get some tissue. My eyes are watering up mad at the minute. I don't know.
We're making you cry? Emotionally moving?
I think I'll introduce myself.
Go for it.
Yeah, no, I'm just here to see what's going on. I said I'd probably join in, so I might not be here for long. I can't confirm anything because I have food on in the oven. But
He always has to eat dinner. He always leaves for dinner. It's a thing of his.
that might take a while though, so because I'm cooking roast
Whose
chicken.
oven is it?
Sorry?
Whose oven is it?
Who owns the oven?
It's my oven.
The production.
You own the means of production?
I do. I'm the bourgeoisie up in this.
Oh, you? That seems a bit hypocritical, no?
Well, no. I mean, I'd say from my perspective on property rights, I mean, I'd say the oven is my personal property. So.
You didn't make it, no?
But you do distinguish between personal property and private property, right?
Yes, I do.
So when you exchange something, when you exchange your labor, when you exchange your savings for what you consider your property, which you didn't make, you don't consider that you're part of the exploitation of whatever labor made that oven?
Well, yeah, that technically might be true. The issue is that I can't exist outside that system at this point in time. I mean, I could technically go. I mean, obviously, you could make the argument, go to North Korea, but then North Korea has an even worse system, which I also don't agree with. So
yeah, either way, you're never gonna be able to sustain yourself by producing everything you consume.
I mean, yeah, technically, I mean, it's physically impossible to do that, but I mean. Anarchists don't actually propose to create a society in which everyone directly produces, I mean, like some kind of weird subsistence society. I mean, I'm sure you could find an anarchist that does believe in that. There's a lot of stupid people out there. Actually, I think there is a tendency that believes that, called autonomists. But I mean, the general. Oh Jesus, Sam. The general idea of left-wing anarchism is that it's more effective to how do I word it? Sorry, God, I lost my. I had a good wording for this. Is that it would just be more effective to establish, say, a kind of a system of a system of communes cooperating to meet certain ends, and you just kind of have a generally shared pool of labor. It's more effective to run it like that. I mean, technically, I could see the argument that, well, but then if I take something someone else made, then I've just exploited that guy. But under the idea that it's all free and available to us all, I mean, I'd argue that it's still a fairer system than capitalism. I mean, technically, I can't create a society where everyone directly owns what they have produced, and nor would I view that society as desirable. So I could see your argument there.
So you don't think that it would be a good idea to have people own the fruits of their labor?
Directly? No.
Well, no, I mean that they could trade them too. That's fine.
I'm not necessarily against the trading of goods. In fact, it's actually worth noting that, and I think a lot of Ancaps would be interested in this, is that, do you know who Nestor Makhno is?
I do not.
Nestor Makhno, you know, the Ukrainian anarchist. In the society...
Leader of the Black Insurrectionary Army of Ukraine during 1917 to 21, there was a counter-revolution to the Bolsheviks, and so on. They basically evolved through reclaiming streets and building communes, which fulfilled pretty much millions of people that interacted and owned democratically the means of production. And a lot of workers' councils were implemented and so on. And
so they had direct democracy, or was it you said councils?
Workers' councils work upon direct democracy. It's like a
so a representative, democratic system, representative democracy.
Actually, no, there weren't representatives. They didn't operate with representatives.
So I don't understand where the council comes up, but let's just assume that it was direct democracy.
Workers' councils, like basically, kind of just
All right, so Eric, please continue.
But what I was going to say is that I think there's a common misconception that I want to kill everyone that engages in the act of trading something. Obviously, I don't. I mean, but I mean, my common argument is that trading Pokemon cards, say, is completely different to the act of me owning masses of huge estates and then trading that, you're selling it and then buying a bunch of factories or something. That the scale is completely off. If you know what I mean.
It depends on perspective, though. I mean, let's just say, for example, I've done my share of trading Magic cards. So Pokemon, I'm sure, is fairly similar to this.
Yes.
When I was a young child, I had Magic cards that I would trade. Now, actually, I wasn't that young, really. Damn, I'm old. Anyway, let's just say, for the sake of argument, that there's a Pokemon card that happens to be it's produced in a quantity of 1 per 10,000 runs. It's extraordinarily rare, extremely rare. And there's another card that, or a group of cards that are all printed in every run, where they're common as dirt. Now, if you were to go to one of these get-togethers where people play Pokemon, you will see that they trade these cards with each other. And at some point, this child of yours, let's say it's your son, has a Pokemon card that's extremely rare, and someone offers him, let's say, some somewhat rare cards, but just a bunch of common cards that that you can get anywhere.
Yeah.
Okay. Now he's traded this extremely rare card away, and he's been, quote, taken advantage of. Is this something that you think is an unfair trade?
As I said, I mean, if he traded a rare Magic card for a lot of other Magic cards, I'd say that's a fair trade, because once again, a Magic card, that's not really an object of exploitation. So it's not a means of production in itself. I mean, the idea is, for instance, as I said, if I have a huge factory and I'm trading it, if I traded the Magic card for a factory, that would be completely different to trading it for other Magic cards. Because
why isn't that the way you trade?
Well, as I said, because I mean, if I trade it for a factory that, say, produces important goods and then occupy that as private property, I'm depriving a lot of people of this, of something quite important. But meanwhile, if I deprive people of a magic card, you see the scale here. If I
What do
deprive
you
people of a
so so because not everyone can use it, no one should be able to use it. That's what you're saying?
no, that's not
What?
necessary. That's not
No,
what I'm
I
saying.
think he's saying that if it's a means of production, the production facility is actually going to be able to benefit a very large number of people, and the magic card theoretically can only benefit one person. So we're talking about a different scale, is what he's saying. Is
Yeah,
that
I mean,
correct?
Why does that make a difference?
Well, I mean, it's a magic card. I mean, if you think a magic card is the same as a factory that produces, let's say, vital goods for, I mean,
Uh,
yeah,
That you
I
can
think the
oh,
discrepancy should be obvious.
Okay, so obviously they are different. We know that they are different
Sorry, you froze.
as far as that goes. But
Depends
certainly,
what they're producing. Maybe I don't like what the factory's producing. Maybe magic card and she passed away and this is my only remembrance of her. Who knows? I mean, nothing has innate value in it. Why should you be able to determine what the trade should be for other people?
Well, because you don't own the factory.
Well,
I mean,
I can if I'm able to convince someone to trade me a magic card for it.
well, I mean, but once again, you're operating. There's a name for this actually. I can't remember the name of it because this argument actually comes up a lot in the academic debate regarding private property. But it's applying the idea of private property to a personal property system, and then kind of how do you say kind of measuring them in the wrong sense against each other. When, like, for instance, you said, "Oh, I could trade a factory for that magic card," but in a personal property system, you couldn't.
Fine. So yeah, fine. So under the world you want to live in, other people are not free to engage in the terms of trade as they see fit because you
could use a factory as personal property, but I don't see why somebody would need, let's say a toy factory, and they would need that all for themselves and just keep all the toys and be able to work the factory all by themselves. It just seems.
well, why do you
Exactly.
need?
They wouldn't do that.
I mean, really, why do you need a computer right now that there are people starving in Africa, and your computer could, all that money's worth that computer.
It's true. It's true. I mean, but the thing is, I have no other option but to hang on. I mean, if I were to, as I said earlier, I mean, I can't go anywhere else. I mean, there's no anarchist society for me to run to. I mean, I
Right.
can't. Am I supposed to go?
We're not saying you have to go anywhere else.
community in Denmark, though, an anarchist community in Denmark. But
Well,
it's like that's more anarcho-collectivist, though, I would say.
Right. I've thought of looking at actually. I have thought of joining a commune. So I mean, I'm actually might start fairly soon. So there you go.
There are communes that do exist, and probably in your neighborhood that you could find that you could join, certainly. But that's not necessarily the point. The point is that you know that there are people who are in need, who could be satisfied by you selling the items that you're using right now, that are luxuries, that are just incredibly valuable items that you could get rid of, and take all that money and put it towards helping those people who are in need, but you choose not to.
Actually, often I do engage in a lot of charity work.
Right.
The thing is, if I sold, let's say, if I sold my computer, for instance, I also give up things such as personal leisure, or I give up things such as the fact that I can't use the internet, which is quite a vital thing in the modern day to have access to the internet.
Sure.
And I don't want to.
Right now.
Sorry.
You are using the internet right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so the question then comes up. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that if you had a factory, okay,
Yeah.
and through the production that your factory does, you were able to generate wealth, and you were able to use this wealth to facilitate your charitable goals, and you would achieve far more charitable, giving through the result of that than selling the factory and then giving that away. Which would be preferable?
Wait, are you talking about like, let's say I was a benevolent capitalist?
Sure, there's plenty of them.
Yeah, they do exist. I'm not gonna lie. So if I'm a benevolent capitalist, I produce and I'm a philanthropist and I give away I use my profit to help people. I'm like a kind of
Yeah.
local.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is that I'm not actually opposed to benevolent capitalists. I mean, if there is a benevolent capitalist, like let's say Roswell Gast, who is actually he's a capitalist and he's an admirable figure for me, Roswell Gast, sorry, because I mean he used his profit to help the people that he helped a lot of people with what he did, and most of his profit went towards improving the lives of his workers rather than himself, and he lived relatively on the same level as them. But I mean, I'm not opposed to this. The issue is that I do not have a guarantee that capitalism will always produce these people. It's in the same way that we can't have a guarantee of a benevolent dictator. I mean, I see a benevolent capitalist.
But is there a guarantee that under any social organization you're going to have good people? I mean, there are no guarantees of that at all. Under any system.
Right.
Of course.
I think we're assuming that if he gives to charity, that's the benevolent end of it, when in reality, if he reinvests in his company or invests in any other place of the market, he could be creating jobs and creating wealth. So, I mean, look at any of the great inventions that were expensive at first, that greedy capitalists purchased, and the price lowered over time. So
Yeah,
now
once again, this is
On the state of the internet.
Once again, this is an unfair comparison. It's saying a capitalist system achieved this, therefore it's only achievable in a capitalist system.
No. I was saying that when looking at a capitalist or someone who owns property, just because they donate money doesn't mean it's necessarily for the greater good. The greater good could be reinvesting in growing their business. I mean, the two biggest philanthropists ever, as a percentage of their income, were Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller.
It's true, but I strongly dislike both those men because they
Right.
claim
So do I. They were cronies, but.
Yeah, I mean, even I agree they were cronies, actually.
but fine. I'm not going to defend them either. We have the Federal Reserve because of the Rockefeller fucker. But you know, I mean, look, people should be able to own the fruits of their labor, and you know, let's start here. What determines how much someone's labor is worth?
Effectively, I'm gonna say that I am not a Marxist. I can see the point.
Yeah, I'm not for the LTV either.
Yeah, I'm not. I defend the LTV because I think it's misunderstood by people on the right wing. No offense, but I personally do not subscribe to the LTV. In fact, the subjective theory of value isn't even against left-wing anarchism. Actually, if you think about it.
It's not. In fact, the subjective theory of
Where
value.
does the exploitation come in?
The exploitation theory is
Rate of surplus value.
Yeah.
The rate of surplus value
anyone can be self-employed at any time, right?
Yes.
I choose.
Not really.
It's a formula. It's
Well,
more-
no, you can quit your job and say, I'm gonna go into the. It's riskier, you know. If I'm self-employed, if I'm self-employed, there's no guarantee I'm gonna make an income. I would rather work for a boss because I get paid right away. There's no chance I'm gonna go bankrupt. Because if you're bankrupt, you're fired and you lose money. I'd rather just.
No, this doesn't actually go in against the argument. I'm getting that kind of Robbins.
Who's got the comeback?
All right, sorry about that.
But yeah, this doesn't actually. Sorry.
Right, so we're getting into somebody here.
Joe.
Capitalists are ruining the audio.
This is all the fault.
Go back. This doesn't actually kind of address the various formulas within the rate of surplus value that kind of generate this kind of exploitation, because most the rate of exploitation is more so the working day divided by the labor produced within equals to a surplus value and the value of the product equals to the surplus product and the total product. It's a derivative formula, if
Right.
I may say it.
All right, so let's just let's talk about the idea that someone is having their excess profit taken from them in a wage slave job, theoretically. All right, so if you own the fruits of Johan, you're going to have to stay muted there if you would. All right, if you own the fruits of your labor, do you have the option to sell those fruits of your labor ahead of time before they're actually made, before you actually do the labor? In other words, can you say, go to somebody and say, I'm going to build you a deck. Can I have $5,000 to do that?
My own labor. I could work at a workers' co-op, but that wouldn't also generate the kind of social relationship of private property.
Well, sure, you could.
Yeah.
Absolutely, you could. That's not the question, though. The question is, can you sell your labor ahead of time?
Can you say again? I didn't get that clearly. Sorry.
Could you give an
necessarily
example?
consider that entirely capitalist, however.
Right, it's not. I'm just asking the question, though. Can you sell your labor ahead of time before you do the work? If you own the fruits of your labor, can you sell the fruits of your labor before you make it?
Yeah, it's called a loan.
Or
No, a contract or whatever, but
doesn't have to be a loan even.
Like,
okay, so let's say that I say to you, all right, I'm going to give you, let's say, $22,000 over the course of this year in exchange for the fruits of your labor. Can you sell that to me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you can make a deal with somebody, and they say, all right, well, the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to pay you based upon the salary system, and your productivity actually is greater than $22,000 over the course of that year because of the technologies that you're using and so on. Now, since you already sold it to me, I still get that, and there's excess labor that exists now that you pre-sold to me because you wanted to have the money then instead of having the money later. And you didn't want to have the risk, you wanted to have the money. Now, is this legitimate or is this illegitimate?
What I'd say is, I mean, I'm going to use an example of, I used to do a lot of work in Italy when I lived in Italy, and I'd work for my neighbors, and basically as a means of exchange, they'd always give me dinner for free, and it was pretty awesome. It was good dinner. So I do their vegetable garden, and I get a free dinner. So basically, I'd say this kind of exchange would be perfectly justified because, I mean, if I'm doing someone's vegetable garden, like a small backyard vegetable garden, and they're doing, making me dinner using their own, their stuff or whatever, this isn't like a massive systematic exploitation. But then
what's the difference between a capitalist who hires a laborer, pays them a wage, and they use the wage to buy food?
Well, once again, I mean, there's the fact that a capital, for instance, let's say that they don't give you back the total in wages, and you're kind of driven into this system involuntarily because it's a system. It's a system.
That's the criticism, then, right? That you, because of the nature of the world, that you are, as a laborer, you are forced into the labor market to work under the boot heel of the capitalist. There's no other choice for you. That's the basic criticism?
That technically, there are other choices.
It's their best choice most of the time. Not that they don't have that choice. It's they don't want it to.
Very limited choices.
Okay.
It's only because of government regulation. You could start anything.
I disagree.
Just
not only is that not true.
Regulation only restricts entry. Right?
Is it true?
Regulation doesn't help you enter the market.
That's not true. I disagree.
Let's let.
How does regulate?
Guys, government regulate.
There's no way regulation. There's no way regulation can help you enter the market. Right?
All right, guys.
Oh
my God! This is anarchy.
Maybe you'll be right.
We're going to have Brenton go ahead, and Brenton, you wanted to say something, if you would, please.
Eric, Can we go to Eric because he didn't get to finish his point? Also,
No, government
disagreed and he
regulation
never did
does
actually.
not just
No.
of capitalists. It serves capitalist interests. Not like capitalists like you guys, but real capitalists. Real capitalists like, I don't know, Bain International, you're going to talk about Goldman Sachs. They set up these regulations specifically to help their businesses, and they make more money, and the market chooses to function that way.
First of all, they're not First
Well,
of
they
all,
may not be capitalists the way you consider it, but they're still
not a real
capitalists. Money, so who cares?
Can I give a...
All right. Everybody,
Semantics, ew.
everybody mute up. We're going to have turns. We're going to take turns, all right?
Yeah, I agree.
I hate semantics, so I just...
Fine, let the capitalists speak first because we're the bosses.
No.
Actually, I'm probably the boss. I'm actually in management.
I'm an independent egoist, so yeah, guys. No.
All right. So as far as the claim is that capitalists, not us capitalists, create regulations. Okay. Now, I got a question for you. Who is going to respect the regulations created by McDonald's or Walmart if they're not government?
No one, of course.
You mean if they're not government?
Whoever has to. Because the capitalists are there. They use the state apparatus to control their capitalists.
We're taking turns here. We're taking turns. Okay, so there's a lot of people trying to talk at the same time. So let's just go ahead and Eric, why don't you answer that particular question?
I do sympathise. I think one very legitimate criticism libertarians do hold that I think is respect-worthy to a degree is, yes, it is true that regulations often, in the US especially, crony capitalism is not such a big issue in Europe. I mean, with the EU, it's becoming one. But for instance, in fact, I think regulations in some parts of Europe, let's say Germany, small businesses get a subsidy to help them enter the market, which I think is a good thing. But you don't have these really, and sometimes regulations only apply depending on the size of your business, or so and so and so on. It's a bit more nuanced. And in America, I mean, you've got some really stupid laws, guys. I'm sorry.
We know, that's why we're here.
Yeah.
But
okay. All right. So then, did you want to specifically answer that question though?
I was going to
respect those regulations if they weren't made by government.
Yeah, people would not respect them. I mean, you couldn't make them without the force to uphold them, of course. I think that libertarians have a valid point, and it is true that regulations often do impede business. The thing is that then, however, I see the system we live in now as separate from the system that you guys advocate, and the system that you guys advocate in a free market often has its own pitfalls and downfalls that our system doesn't have.
Okay.
No, our system also incorporates your system if it really works. So, but let me ask you a question. Let me ask you. So you guys talk about surplus value and exploitation, right? So I'm assuming that's the profit made from the unit of labor that what that unit of labor produced in the final value of the product. Yes, but the exploitation is simultaneously mutual, right? Because it begs the question. Let's say we're
exploitation is like more so a calculation, not so kind of a mutual benefit situation.
No, it's mutual beneficial in the fact that his next best alternative. I mean, it's obvious that the laborer takes his best alternative, right? So if the alternative of that, he could produce that product himself, right? So it's obvious that entrepreneur had to organize resources in such a way that the labor could actually help produce the final product. Without that entrepreneurship, they wouldn't have been able to produce that. That's where that profit. It's that price. It's that labor, the entrepreneurship, the organization of the resources, is what he's getting paid for, and it's obvious because the laborer do it himself. It begs the question: why wouldn't he do it? Because he can't. He doesn't have the facilities, for some reason or another, to make a final product.
That's exploitative. Is the claim?
Not only that, but his next best alternative is the next employer under that'll pay the next best wage, right? So there's also a surplus value there. So if you take the difference between that and what he currently makes with his current employer, he's exploiting his employer the same exact way.
Well, where does the employer make the money? Tell me, please.
Because
what is the employer?
Because of his comparative advantage in making whatever product he produces. right? So he's obviously more efficient. Let's say there's a second producer of that same good, but he's not willing to pay this. He's not willing to pay the same wage. He pays under the wage that the laborer currently makes. So it's obvious that shows he's less efficient in making the product.
I disagree.
So he's better off in that respect.
Okay, I guess your question then, Eric, is that
How does you disagree? How does
the businessman? Where does the businessman get off making all this money when it's not his labor that's actually producing the product?
Yes.
Okay.
Ultimately, all exchange is labor for labor. You gotta realize that.
Yeah, but I mean,
it's all labor for labor.
Yeah, that's the point. But we've got a useless middleman, and that's the capitalist.
Okay.
There's two middlemen. There's
useless middlemen.
There's capitalists and there's entrepreneurs.
Kenji, this is not the Kenji and Eric show, so let's let.
Kenji is saying brilliant, profound stuff.
All right, but I want to have my turn, and I want to have Keith have his turn to respond to these questions too. So we're going to pass the potato around and have these discussions. So actually, Keith, why don't you go ahead and respond to Eric's assertion? How is it that you've got this capitalist who where does he get off getting this money? How does he justify getting paid?
He justifies getting paid by creating something that's valued by society. So not only did you talk about, well, they put all the investment in and they put all their labor into the foundation, they're not guaranteed a return on that investment. They could go broke like that. That's why 80% of millionaires are first generation. That's why you hear about all the lottery winners who lose all their money, because you can't just fall into money and become a greedy capitalist. You have to work towards it. This is not a coincidence.
Yeah, I can't emphasize this enough. You need to distinguish between the capitalist and the entrepreneur, right? So you don't need to be the capitalist to own part of the country. If you have a good enough idea and you're just a everyday plebeian, right? If you have a good enough idea, you can go to the capital market, raise the funds, and organize all the resources in order to produce your product. You don't need to save yourself. If you have that's how specialized the market is, right? All you need is the idea. You do not need the capital. You can raise that if your idea is good enough.
Often not actually. There's sometimes where people won't think your idea is profitable and they don't follow it. But setting that aside for a second, I think the Brenton Lengel's here. I think I lost my train of thought. Give me a moment. If anyone else is
an entrepreneur and a capitalist, he's saying that there's an entrepreneur, you can come up with an idea and you can get investments, and you're saying what?
Yes, I remember now. Sorry. Basically, I mean, the issue is that these, and once again, there is a word for this, and I really should remember it because I keep having to try and look for this word, and I don't remember it. But
it doesn't matter what the word is; just give us a definition or whatever.
But yeah, I was about to. The definition is basically it's when you say this happens in a market economy. If this doesn't happen in a socialist economy, which has the same way of doing, has a different way of doing the same thing, then therefore it's ineffective. And this is what you're doing with this whole thing where you're saying the capitalist with his investments and his innovativeness, these same actions would occur using different methods. And these actions are only rendered important by the nature of the market system. Without the market system, these actions are unimportant and have no relevance. So what you have to do instead is not say the market justifies their existence, but justify the existence of the market.
Okay, so I guess what you're saying is that you don't want us to create a false dichotomy that this type of thing can't exist in a communist society, but it does exist in a capitalist society. I
wouldn't say a communist society, a socialist one, though.
Okay, a socialist one. Okay, not exactly sure what the difference is, other than we just want to be accurate.
We usually use the term socialism as a transition stage to communism, so it's.
Okay.
Well, that's
not always, because there's some mutualists who are.
If we kind of use the term socialism into the Marxist term, it's used all differently and so on. So it's like, yeah.
Right. So the idea that yes, it could occur in a socialist type venue or with a cooperative, collaborative type of thing, sure, it certainly could. And what the anarcho-capitalists are saying is, may the best method work, may the best method succeed. If you have a system where you have a non-hierarchical system of creating businesses and products that you're able to distribute to the people that you're going to be working with, great, do it. We have a different system that we are going to try, and whichever one actually achieves what it is that people desire and what they're willing to put into to get something back from is the one that they should be participating in. If their preferences are that they want to buy from the local socialist Rotary Club or whatever it happens to be, then great, go for it. If they want to buy something from, or they want to trade with the people who produced the good in a hierarchical capitalist venture, great, go for it. Whichever one they want to use, right?
I disagree. I think there's kind of a false dichotomy. I mean, of whichever one you like best, treating societies as a kind of competition-like mode. I mean, there's two problems here. The first problem is that capitalism, by its very nature, it's expansive, and it is, by its very nature as well, it will occupy space. For instance, I can claim a piece of private property, this huge factory, and I've immediately deprived a lot of people of this piece of private property, and this businessman could then go and hire private police forces, and these private police forces could later be used to slowly start invading upon communist land, and this is going to cause conflict, and there's countless problems that arise from that, and
especially because of the different views on what property is. There could definitely because an anarcho-capitalist can say, well, this is my land now because it was previously common, and even we'll say it's common land. However, it would still be deprived from us because we don't believe in private. I guess it just comes down to we're going to be slaughtered for our or we're going to be deprived of land because of our beliefs on property. But,
and then I'll bring up this. Do you mind if I finish? Sorry.
I think that you guys have made a point, and we'd like to have a chance to respond to it. The claim is that the capitalist will appropriate property that was the commons and is no longer available to all these people, depriving them of it. And my question or my response to it is so does the communist or the socialist. They appropriate land and they declare it as this is my space, this is what I own, and it's called a home, a domicile. And if you have too many domiciles that take up all the land, then you're stuck with people who have nothing, no place where they can go and call home. So, I mean, you're taking advantage of those people who don't have homes. If you build, let's say you have 100 acres with which to work with in this particular scenario, well, only a certain number of homes can be built, and other people are left out in the cold. The problem still occurs.
But if the thing is that, for instance, in a capitalist society, these homes will only be sold if it's profitable to sell the homes, which more often than not, it's not.
We're talking about the socialist situation.
Yeah, I was just going to draw a comparison.
Okay.
For instance, in my country, where I am in Britain, we have 5 homes to every 1 homeless person, but they're not given to the homeless people because it's not profitable to give it to them. In an anarchist society, if we had the homes, we'd give them to as many people as possible. In fact, if in the some homes, the larger ones, we'd probably try and fit more people in. We'd try and probably rotate who gets the home at what time, because everyone would be involved in this as a community mutually. We'd all be involved in making the decision process.
That's what rent's for.
Yeah, but in a capitalist society, you get things like rent and you get stuff like that, and it's given on a base of profitability. I mean, if someone can never repay their rent, you don't give them the house in the first place. If then you also get debt slaves and things like that, and that's just despicable as well. And also, there's the overall thing that you have a landlord, and the landlord he lords over you, and he makes the decisions. And I mean, for instance, what's to stop in an anarcho-capitalist society a landlord saying, "Okay, I've got all these houses. You people really need housing here. I've got the only housing available around here, and you can't make it to the next guy." And if you're going to live in my house, you're going to obey my rules, and my rules are your daughter has to have sex with me, and you're not allowed to read any subversive literature, and I'm going to put cameras in all your houses to spy on you. I mean, there's ultimately then no distinction between the state and the landlord.
Well, obviously we don't live in a world where there's only one person who has has places for lodging, and the idea that you would have only one person, it doesn't take into the fact that in a market economy you're going to have competition.
It's true, so it's more effective for large companies to effectively go up against each other, to use this system of exploitation than it is to use or to play nice. And while someone could play nice, that doesn't mean that they could necessarily compete on the market either way, because there's a finite amount of homes and there's a finite amount of profit that can be used to build new homes, and there's a finite amount of land to build those homes on, and this is all based on private property.
Yeah, I don't think you're applying the profitability motive properly. I mean, you got to understand, again, owning property isn't costless, right? To protect it, maintain it, watch over it. You got to hire somebody. The further out you go from where you are, it gets harder and more costly to protect and maintain it. So it comes to some point where the productive value of some guy who can't own land, the profitability barrier will be eclipsed at some point, and he'll be able to buy that piece of land that capitalist is not utilizing, right? If it's not generating a good revenue, the profitability motive is for him to sell it. You guys ever heard of the law of diminishing marginal utility?
I've not heard of that, but I see what you're saying either way.
Utility goes. Yeah, so it kind of goes against this whole thing of hoarding land, right? The next unit of land you buy, you get less and less utility at some point, right? Just like you get tired of eating any food.
Well, I disagree. I disagree with that.
Give me a counterexample for that.
I will. I'll give you a counterexample. The rear stamp collector.
Yeah, but you gotta have more units to consume.
Right. Every single time that he finds and gets and obtains the next rare stamp, and
sure, but okay, so
each one adds value.
You can't do this, right? Because in order to profit from this, let's say you monopolize it. Let's say you monopolize the supply of some collectible. You gotta walk out of it too. How are you gonna capitalize without making the price go down? It's like going in an illiquid penny market, right? You can't buy in without getting back out, without selling and then decreasing the price again.
I've monopolized.
So it cancels out, Robert.
Yeah. All right, Eric, your comment.
Well, once again, there's I think it's important to distinguish between types of monopolies. I mean, there's monopolies where you can drive the price down, and then there's things like resource monopolies, like let's say De Beers Diamonds, which isn't subsidized by any government, I'd like to add.
Yes, it is.
But no, it's not. Can you cite me some?
De Beers is in what? It was South America.
No, it's in Africa.
Yes, sorry, South Africa. My mistake. South Africa, the country. Now, the South African government has prohibitions on the number of companies that can come in and become diamond miners.
Could you? But there's one, I haven't heard this. I'm not aware of any subsidies. Could you link me to some sources on this? And you might be right.
It's not like a cash subsidy. It's a subsidy in that it prevents competition.
Well, I mean, how does this subsidy? I mean, as I said, can I have sources to this subsidy on De Beers?
Sure, just a moment.
Yeah.
And then,
even though that the subsidy prevents competition, assuming this is true, it does still have competition. There are other businesses, one owned by the Russian government, one from Australia, that mine diamonds. But that's not the problem, because they all follow the De Beers model of mining huge amounts of diamonds, keeping them in a vault, keeping the price artificially low.
Wait, this is the diamond analogy. Okay, I've seen this. I've seen this argument in the Austrian Economics versus Marxism in this kind of response here. Unlike the concept of labor value, which is objective, the concept of marginal utility, as it was called, is subjective. Whether I personally like or hate diamonds, for example, has no effect on how much labor measured in terms of time that it takes on average under current conditions of production to produce them. It might indeed be that I really hate diamonds, and even if I had plenty of water, I would pay more for an additional glass of water than I would for an additional diamond. But this is rather unlikely.
Okay, so this is you're bringing us back to the labor theory of value. Is that what we're doing there, or?
I think he just brought it up as an aside. I don't think we're talking about labor theory.
Are we not talking about that? Oh, never mind.
It's worth noting though that
I've heard on that.
even using this example you just gave, when multiple companies, let's say like these 3 companies, have almost a total monopoly on the supply of diamonds in the world.
Maybe it wasn't the actual.
It is true.
Analogies on that.
It's more profitable for them to cartel than it is for them to go against each other.
Okay.
It also involves a lot less risk, which means there's going to be more profits and more investments coming in from private investors. I mean, capitalists fetishize risk all the time, but really they're constantly trying to manage it and keep it as low as possible, which is why the markets choose governments and choose government models. There's less risk in that. Healthy competition they talk about so that, you know, people will leave them alone and not mess with them, but really they don't want to compete. They want to succeed. And you know, good, healthy competition means they might lose. And what kind of an idiot wants to lose at capitalism?
I definitely get your point, and you know what? It's absolutely true that there are, you know, if you have the option of choosing a government to pay off and to get benefits from and reduce your risk and eliminate it entirely, well, obviously that's a good choice if you have it available to you. But if you don't have it available to you, if you don't have a government that people believe has the authority to initiate violence, then you don't have that as an option. But back to the cartel thing, you know, as far as the prisoner's dilemma type of thing, where you know you have an option as to when you can break with your cartel and when you can't, and so on. What happens is that you get a price at which you can break the cartel, where it becomes more profitable for you to break the cartel.
I disagree that this inherently always occurs.
Well, let's say that the cartel jacks up the price up to the point where you have an inflation of, let's say, 400.
Hold on.
What's that? Okay, if it's 400-fold over it, and somebody can drop their price down to 200% of the.
Oh no, I've just got announced that my my dinner is finished. So
all right,
I will return.
He's out there.
I can take this if nobody else wants to.
All right.
Yeah, I'll let Brenton be my official replacement. It was nice. Great. It was nice talking, and I'm glad this is actually way more civil than I expected it to be. So kudos to all the Ancaps and the Ancoms, and great job. I wish the Ancom versus Ancap group was as civil as this, to be honest. So good debating.
It's easier
guys.
to be a dick when you're just text and when you don't have to see somebody's face.
Yeah, it is. It is easier. Okay, so we were talking about the cartel, where you've got 400% profit margins instead of 200% profit margins, which you could take advantage of. At some point where you keep increasing this percentage, you start to see drop off in sales because the product is no longer, people are no longer willing to pay these exorbitant prices. Then one of these capitalists looks at the situation and says, well, I could have an immediate boon in sales if I were to drop my price down to half of that and take 200% profit instead of 400%. Now, at some percentage, depending upon personal preference, I would believe, there is a point at which the opportunity to break with the cartel becomes so profitable that the person is willing to go ahead and jump ship.
Yeah, but the cartel is going to be actively working against it to prevent these conditions from happening. I mean, this isn't like people are just going into business blind saying, I'll do this, I'll take advantage of this opportunity. They're looking out for their future profits. So while, X investor or B investor is aware that this could happen, what's going to happen is the cartel is also aware that that's going to happen. They will take steps to stop it. They'll buy up supplies, they'll buy out competitors, they'll do whatever is in their power to ensure that their business succeeds, which is what you have to do under capitalism.
Right. Now, there comes a point, though, where the inflation of the price becomes so high that despite all their efforts, they're going to have somebody break with the ranks and sell out. Now, if you reduce it down to a certain level of profitability where that doesn't happen, then you've got a maximum level of exploitation that you would call, right?
I'd say you have a maximum level of exploitation in that specific way under those specific conditions. But conditions change, and there are other ways to exploit people, and people who run big businesses understand that, and they're looking for ways to do it. A good example actually would be the Commodities Trading Index, what we had with Goldman Sachs, where they found that they could drive the price of gold and the price of oil and a number of other prices up to these astronomical, unsustainable levels. And while doing so, as long as they were not the ones left holding the hot potato, as long as they were not the ones left who actually got the product in the end, they made bank. We saw that, and that's
not exactly a good example of a free market, though. I mean, if you're going to compare a government-run regulatory system, they run the regulations.
Especially commodities like gold, where they run on. Especially with commodities like gold, they run on fractional reserve systems, just like money. So
I'm not disagreeing with that.
When you can flood the market with paper gold and not real supply, this is not the free market here.
Well, I don't think it ever was the free market. I don't think the free market is a real thing. I think it's a story that was made up to justify people not taking an interest in companies behaving irresponsibly. I mean, at any point, even if you remove all government from a system, you still have giant bits of industry that collect. You still have people with more power than others. And when that power is unequal, you don't have a free market. If you got the richest guy in town and you've got a poor guy in town trying to compete with him, the richest guy in town will always have an advantage, whether there's a government or not. That's just the way it works.
No, with the government, it creates all these distortions that it's very hard to analyze, especially when you just take into account reputation. When people can hide behind the facade of a corporate name instead of having their name up front, when they can hide behind limited liabilities, it's just such a dynamic thing when you unleash just reputation alone.
Yeah. I'm not going to argue that stuff doesn't happen. That reputation
I think you're discounting. I think not that you don't acknowledge it, but you discount it too heavily.
I may be, but what I'm seeing here is I think you're underestimating capitalist innovation. I think you're underestimating how hard and how smart the capitalists at the top, who actually have the system figured out, are running things. They don't need a government to do this. A government helps them, sure, but that's not the only reason it's there, and they can still do everything that they do. You can still have shadowy companies. You can still change your name. You can still deceive the public. You just have a slightly harder time doing it.
They do this because lobbying is profitable.
Take the government out of the whole thing, okay, Genchi? And what he's saying is basically, if you have no government at all, what's to stop, James Rockefeller from creating a business named
because it's not profitable. It is not profitable to try to monopolize everything.
Why wouldn't it be? That's incredibly profitable.
It actually isn't, because you need to own all these resources. You need to be able to utilize it. The law of diminishing marginal returns in this case. Right? You can't just keep buying more and maintain profitability. There's a profitability cutoff point where you maximize. To maximize profitability, there's only a limited amount of resources that you need to consume. Right? You can't add on to that a certain amount of a resource like land or labor and expect to be more profitable at that.
Okay, but what does that have to do with businesses changing their name to appeal to a different consumer base? I mean, I talked about this earlier.
In a free market.
Dove soap and Axe body spray. The two of them got together, and they're actually owned by the same company. Dove Soap ran a campaign aimed at women, so you're beautiful just the way you are, some sort of slogan like that. At the same time, Axe body spray ran this huge patriarchal women are objects kind of campaign. And in fact, this got a lot of play in the papers where they're saying like, oh, buy Dove if you believe in feminism, buy Axe if you like are against feminism. And people went nuts for it, and they bought left and they bought right, and at the end of the day, all of the money went to the exact same company. Companies feign this competition. They feign fighting each other because that drives sales. That's advertising for them. But they're not actually in competition. I think the same thing happened with like Rage Against the Machine and Justin Bieber. There was a huge competition in England as to who was going to win this major record deal. Fans got together. They pushed the Rage CD, which was like 11 years old, to the top of the charts. And guess what? Rage and Justin Bieber, same exact label. It was all concocted by the ad people behind them. So you have the appearance of choice, you have the appearance of competition where there is none, and that doesn't require a government. That just requires a smart guy with enough resources.
Right. Okay.
Who would need a record contract if there wasn't IP laws?
Well, yeah, we'll talk about that at a different time.
You couldn't protect your song.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to the idea that in a free market where you have no government involved, could somebody create a company that was called I don't know, Widget?
I really think that'd be antiquated. As far as hiding behind a corporate logo and limited liability, that'd be pretty gone. I mean, people would want to know who's behind you.
Don't call it a corporate logo. Call it a different name.
You'd have to put your name on it. You'd have to actually put your name on it.
Who's going to make you do that?
Because the consumer, when everyone else does, they're going to want you to, right? Or you can theoretically you can theoretically hide behind some logo or name, right? But there's uncertainty built into that unless you've built up a reputation with that logo. So any name or any name of an entity must maintain a reputation. The thing is with this, the way the corporate system works these days is that there's no incentive to maintain the reputation. Sometimes there'll come a point where they'll think self-interest dominates the reputation of the corporation name, and that's why you have.
Okay, actually, I'm not going to deny that the idea that there could be some company that can make names and actually create two competing names that they own both, and they both, one tries to appeal to this sensibility and the other one tries to appeal to that sensibility, and they argue back and forth, but they're the same unit. They're owned by the same.
All it takes is the internet in a free market to say so, right? So this company is owned by this guy.
Can't the company pay someone to go on the internet and say otherwise?
Yeah, sure. But if they're caught lying, that'll damage their reputation. Now, again, it is so the justice system is so convoluted with the reputation system as far as libel. If you take out libel and slander, anyone can say anything, right? But the more credible you are, the more it'll be believed. So your reputation becomes more of an asset here. The fact that these
more money
laws
means a better reputation. You can afford better advertising. You can afford bigger.
No,
you can talk a lot more when you have
the other
more
way
money.
around, right? It's because your reputation is so good that you have a lot of money. Now, if you want to sacrifice some of your reputation, which is you're actually generating some of your money, you're going to lose out in future profits. If you want to
why do you have more money just because your reputation is good?
That's a non-monetary cost.
Okay, what was that, Brent?
Why do you necessarily have to have more money just because your reputation is good? As an example, you've got the Koch brothers. They did business with Iran.
Pointing to specific example.
That's
right.
Exactly.
I can pointing to Michael Jordan. He's a basketball player. Does that mean I'm a human? Just because I'm a human like him, I should be a basketball player too?
I'm confused as to what you're asking me there.
You guys, Ancoms usually gravitate toward exceptions rather than rules. Can you present a mechanism rather than a special example within a government system where you can't
I'm
really
using an example just to illustrate a point. I'm not talking about an exception. I'm talking about
but you're implying a mechanism there. You're
Okay, Kenshi, let me ask the question here.
You're using inductive reasoning.
Right. Well, here's the question that we want to ask you, Brenton, is rather than citing the Koch brothers as a reputation example, okay, obviously there's going to be some poisoning of the well there because the Koch brothers has a reputation in the anarcho-communist community of being evil, horrible, bad people. Okay, so to avoid that kind of tainting of the well type of thing, what he's asking is if you could if you could explain how it is that that money buys reputation.
Put us in a room. Put us all 7 of us in a room, and explain to me how it's profitable to do these things without costing more in reputation than it is, as far as your short-term gains.
Okay. Well, let's not use the Koch brothers because they're kind of.
Put all 6 of us, 7 of us in a room, and say Robert's a company, you're a company, I'm a company, and do your thought experiment from there.
Well, putting all of us in a room just kind of, that brings us down to a micro level where we all know each other, we can all see each other. But there's
introduce anonymity or whatever you want.
There's 6 billion people on the planet. You can't just put 7 people in a room and try to talk about business.
With the internet, and if you free up reputation, I claim that it can be. I mean, if you have something that's tagged on you, like a reputation, and a digital tattoo.
What particularly gives me a digital tattoo? I mean, what authority force comes in and says
it'll be part of the free market? You won't be able to control. You won't be able to control your reputation.
Why?
It'll be like an open source code like Bitcoin, let's say.
Right.
Actually,
and why should I?
Okay, let me explain how it would work theoretically. And keep in mind that we're talking about theoretically, not something that we know will happen, because as we all from the anarcho-capitalist position will say is whatever works in the market will continue, and whatever fails to work will be discarded. People will buy the things that they like. They won't buy the things that they don't like. And so, for example, if you were to go online and you were to pull up eBay, okay, you're going to get reputations on that site showing that most buyers liked what they got, that they were satisfied with their purchase. Okay, and so they've got a good reputation there. Now, there are also similar websites for instructors at schools that basically say, all right, well, this guy was a crappy instructor. I wouldn't recommend him. You want to avoid him. Or if you're going to take this instructor, make sure you don't talk about religion because he's a real raging atheist who hates God.
This is
I get what you're saying here.
This mechanism, and keep in mind, this mechanism Robert's talking about is severely hampered because of libel and slander laws, right?
Yeah,
they can sue you
if.
So if you remove.
Wait, Kenshi, let him talk, please.
Thanks, dude. I know what you're talking about here. This is essentially like Uber is an app that does this, Yelp, Airbnb, these sort of online reputation trackers that get attached and then they bring in more business. The thing is that I've actually seen how Yelp works. My boss, one of my bosses, I work like 3 jobs, he has his own business. And he is very mindful of his Yelp reviews. Here's the thing about Yelp, though. If you pay Yelp, Yelp deletes the bad reviews and pushes good reviews to the top. If you do not pay Yelp, guess what? A lot of your good reviews don't ever show up. So my guy gets like 5 stars every single time, but only a few of his customers show up, and anytime he gets a negative ad, it gets pushed right to the top because that's how Yelp makes its money, and that's how Uber and Airbnb make their money, by being these middlemen.
If that's true, Yelp only loses credibility here. So you see
so there's a Yelp for Yelp now,
right?
Like there's going to be a competitor.
Yeah. So the question is if you were to see a free market,
the ultimate Yelp is open source.
If you were to see a free market in the provision of reputation tracking, okay, you've got a variety of different groups competing to see who can provide the most accurate information regarding your experience with a company, okay? Now, because you have IP law, you can't create Jelp, which is the exact same thing as Yelp, but with a J. And you can't make that because Yelp has this copyright. All right, so if there is the possibility of somebody else providing the service and people are seeing, well, you know what, I got all these rave reviews about this thing, and then I went to the restaurant and I hated it, it sucked, and I put my review on Yelp and it didn't show up, they're going to move on. They're going to find a different company that they're going to be using for reputation services, and they're going to tell their friends, and they're going to put it out there on their Facebook or on their whatever, and then you start to see that traffic move from the provider who doesn't do the job well to the provider who does the job well, and people will migrate away from bad service, and the bad service being a bad reputation tracking service.
Right, but the thing is that I don't think Yelp is providing bad service when it does this to various
Their
businesses.
ultimate customers are the consumers.
I really don't think so. The consumers are their capital. The consumers are the people who come in and are funneled into these businesses. Their primary customers are the businesses themselves.
Absolutely.
So it's not about is Yelp fair. It's does Yelp get money for Walmart or X restaurant.
That's absolutely correct, and that's what we're saying is that Yelp is a business model that is designed to benefit the business, and the thing is that the business is not actually the one that, in what we're talking about, would be pursuing a reputation service. Yelp, in my understanding, the way that you're explaining it, and I'm not sure that Yelp is doing what you're saying, but let's just assume that it is. Okay, if Yelp is doing what you're saying, then Yelp is not a reputation firm. Yelp is an advertising marketing tool.
Yeah, but what's the difference between a reputation firm and an advertising marketing tool? They're going to do the same thing. I mean, take, for instance, the recent 2008 crash. You had a number of companies that were partnering with businesses and with banks to give false ratings. These were reputation monitoring companies, and they still went out of their way to protect their bigger contracts and the interests of their bigger of the bigger folks that they're dealing with. So they can make more money by serving them than serving us. Why should they ever serve us?
Because they're going to be subscription based, and that's where you're going to get more accurate information. An example that I would give you is Consumer Reports. Okay, so far as I know, Consumer Reports has been reliable and has not, quote unquote, sold out to a company that says I want a good, favorable review when their product doesn't deserve one. Okay, there are companies that can and will do good reputation services, and over the course of time, you will eventually see that there will be companies that actually do represent the interest of the consumer, whether it's the business model is created through a process of having the consumer actually pay for this reputation service, or whether it's done through some sort of interest in being just and right, and people who have some sort of cause that they believe that they're standing behind, and they become kind of like religious about it and making sure that their services are accurate. Whatever the methodology that happens, there will be, in this competing marketplace of services to do reputation, there will be some that will come up that are accurate, and they will receive more views. They will become the one that people go to more often, and once that happens, you start to see that these reputations matter.
Well, you could do that, but once again, you're just giving me a hypothetical business model that might hypothetically do what you say it will. I don't see any evidence for why that would happen, or even why these personal, subscription-based credit reports would be able to outcompete and to deal with all the advertising. I mean, you go to Madison Avenue, you start talking to an advertising firm, they can give you numbers. If you run this ad, this many people, on average, give or take a few thousand, are going to feel this way. They know this because they've done it time and time again. It's a science.
I don't understand here. So, this is the problem when you bring up specific example to demonstrate a point here, because you're talking about Yelp. None of us here really knows what the proportion of revenue they get from businesses that pay them and ad generated revenue, right? So and now you're talking about ads here. So if they're generating revenue from ads, that means there are people coming to the
He's
site.
not saying Yelp is generating revenue from ads. He's saying that Yelp is an advertising service that is cloaked as a rating service, which I would agree. I would just think that just about every business could make more money as an advertising service than as a rating service.
So again,
I'll tell you what. This is an example specifically from my own life.
Yeah, I mean, here we go again. The thing is, when you bring up these things, I don't know the details, right?
Right.
You can present all the points that are give your perspective a better light. So that's a problem with bringing up a specific example. I can do it all day, but that's why. No, give me the mechanism, and then.
Well, guys, unfortunately, we come to the end of the show. We've got 3 minutes left, and I just want to make a couple of things clear, so that we, when we wrap up, I want to give everybody an opportunity to pitch their particular outlets, if they're providing content, if they have a website, things like that. So, just as far as to wrap up what our conversation there was, Brenton. My claim is that if you have a free market in which you have open competition, you will start to see that the level of wealth disparity will decrease. Okay, that you will have a larger amount of capital that is available for competition, that provides alternatives to the marketing avenues that you see out there, and instead will provide review services. Sam, your typing is... I'm going to mute you there. All right. So, these companies that I'm talking about, they can and will be made. This is a claim that that I'm making just based upon the fact that people demand drives services. If the population demands a product or service, and there's money to be made by selling that product or service, then a capitalist will provide it. They will go out and do it. And obviously you demand, and others like you demand, honest, reliable information regarding the how businesses provide their services, whether they're a good employer, whether they're a good whether they produce good products or services. This is something that matters to you, and it matters to a lot of other people. And it will matter to more people the more we actually stop getting government education involved and have free market education, where people actually become smart instead of indoctrinated. Anyway, if you would go ahead and let us know if there's a place that we could go to find more information about what it is that you're saying, or what it is that you'd like, a website that you would recommend for checking your information out, Brenton, or anyone else. So let's start with Brenton.
Okay, my name is Brenton Lengel. I am the host of Insurrection with Brenton Lengel, which is carried on the Starcom radio network. You can find a link to the archive of my show if you go to brentonlengel.com, just BRENTONLENGEL, and click on the thing just below my picture. It says Insurrection. You'll go straight to my show. I do it weekly. Just had Ray Lewis, the former police captain who was arrested with Occupy Wall Street, on my show, as well as Rogue of the Crew Shadows. So, Underground Arts and Anarchy show. It is broadcast every Saturday. And just to respond a little bit, I will say that I don't disagree with any point that you're bringing up here, but I think what you're talking about is a temporary state, and it is a part of equilibrium that cannot be maintained for any length of time, no longer than a single generation, because wealth centralizes, and as people win, companies get more powerful. When you remove the government, it creates a power vacuum, and if you do not smash the state, if you don't defeat that ability to use violence, and that includes
temporary.
Yeah, that includes these security companies you talk about. If you don't get rid of them, you're just going to be back in the exact same situation you started in a couple of years, 3 generations max.
All right, and Daniel, did you have anything to say as far as sites that you'd recommend that we go to see your stuff?
Nope. It is on my YouTube channel, Daniel the Sexiest. Probably have to make a more professional name at some point.
And can
what?
Nothing to promote. I don't want to state that Governments are temporary. Vacuums are temporary. Vacuums are imbalances.
And Sam?
Yeah, I've got a channel called Anarcho-Communist Rants. My next video will be on the gift economy because Ancap's on the debate group kind of addressed that a little bit more now. And so I'll kind of like answer a few questions onto some of the critiques of gift economy and so on the basics of gift economics especially. And for conclusion from all my arguments, I just need to quit committing brain farts. But hey, that's about it. Anarcho-communist rants. That's it.
Okay, so I want to thank you guys all for joining us, and if you've been watching, thank you for watching. This has been the Anarchist Experience. I'm your host, Robert Kruger. Please join us again next time on the Anarchist Experience at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Sundays. Take care.